Marcus Chen stepped off the transport shuttle, his military boots touching Earth soil for the first time in 3 years. The spaceport buzzed with activity, but everything felt different, smaller, quieter. After the constant thunder of plasma cannons and the screams of dying aliens on Kepler 442b, even the loudest announcement over the intercom sounded like a whisper. He adjusted the strap of his duffel bag, feeling the weight of medals and commendations inside. At 19, he was a decorated war hero, the youngest human to ever receive the Galactic Service Cross. The media called him the Miracle of Kepler after he single-handedly held off a Zephyrian assault for 6 hours, saving an entire colony of 12,000 people. But right now, he just wanted to go home. The automatic doors slid open, and Marcus saw his parents waiting in the crowd. His mother, Sarah, had tears streaming down her face. His father, David, stood with military posture even though he'd never served a day in his life. They both looked older, more worn than he remembered. "Marcus!" Sarah ran toward him, wrapping him in a hug that felt both foreign and familiar. She smelled like the vanilla perfume she'd always worn, but her embrace felt fragile, like she might break if he hugged back too hard. "Welcome home, son." David's handshake was firm, but his eyes were cautious, studying, like he was looking for the boy who'd left and finding someone else entirely. The drive home through suburban Cleveland was surreal. Marcus stared out the window at houses that looked like toys compared to the massive military installations he'd grown used to. Kids rode bicycles on sidewalks. An elderly man watered his garden. A dog barked at a passing car. Normal life, continuing as if the galaxy wasn't at war. "So," Sarah said from the passenger seat, glancing back at him nervously. "We've got some news. Good news, actually." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Yeah? The school district agreed to let you finish your senior year. You can graduate with your class in June. Isn't that wonderful?" The words hit him like a plasma blast to the chest. "High school?" "Well, you only completed your junior year before you enlisted," David explained, catching Marcus's eye in the rearview mirror. "Technically, you still need 12 more credits to graduate." Marcus felt something twist in his stomach. He'd commanded a squad of battle-hardened Marines. He'd made split-second decisions that saved thousands of lives. He'd stared down a Zephyrian warlord in single combat and won. And now they wanted him to sit in a classroom and learn about algebra? "Can't I just get a GED or something?" "Marcus, honey." Sarah turned around fully, her eyes pleading. "This is your chance to be normal again, to have the experience you missed. Senior year, prom, graduation. Don't you want that?" What he wanted was to never see another battlefield, never hold another weapon, never make another life-or-death decision. But going backward felt wrong, too. "I guess," he said quietly. Their house looked exactly the same. Same blue shutters, same crack in the driveway, same basketball hoop with the bent rim that he'd dunked on too hard when he was 16. His room had been preserved like a shrine. Star Wars posters on the walls, video game controllers on the desk, clothes in the closet that would never fit again. Marcus sat on his childhood bed and stared at a model of the Millennium Falcon on his nightstand. 3 years ago, that ship had seemed like the coolest thing in the universe. Now, after flying in real starfighters and watching real space battles, it looked pathetic. His phone buzzed. A text from his old best friend, Jake. "Dude, heard you were back. Can't wait to catch up at school tomorrow. You're gonna love senior year." Marcus set the phone aside without responding. How could he explain that he'd already lived through things that would give Jake nightmares for months? That night, he lay awake listening to the silence. No distant artillery, no emergency klaxons, no Marines calling out patrol schedules. Just the hum of the air conditioner and his father snoring down the hall. It should have been peaceful. Instead, it felt wrong. He must have dozed off because suddenly he was back on Kepler 442b. The sky was burning orange from plasma fire. Sergeant Rodriguez was screaming for medic support while Private Williams bled out in the mud. The Zephyrian shock troops were advancing, their chittering battle cries echoing across the battlefield. Marcus jerked awake, his heart hammering. Sweat soaked his military-issue t-shirt. The glowing numbers on his alarm clock read 3:17 a.m. He took deep breaths using the meditation techniques the military psychologists had taught him. But the silence felt oppressive now, like the calm before an ambush. Morning came too soon. Sarah had made pancakes, his favorite breakfast from childhood. They tasted like cardboard in his mouth, but he forced himself to eat them while she chattered nervously about how excited she was for him to start school again. "You'll love Mrs. Patterson. She's teaching AP Literature now. Remember how you always loved reading?" Marcus nodded, though the last book he'd read was Advanced Combat Tactics in Low-Gravity Environments. Not exactly Shakespeare. David drove him to Westfield High School. The building looked smaller than Marcus remembered, all red brick and green lawns. Students walked in groups, laughing and complaining about tests and homework. A few couples held hands near their lockers. Everyone looked impossibly young. "You sure you don't want me to walk in with you?" David asked. "I'm good." Marcus grabbed his backpack, which felt ridiculously light compared to the 60-pound combat packs he'd carried across alien battlefields. The main office smelled like coffee and copy machine toner. Mrs. Henderson, the secretary, practically bounced out of her chair when she saw him. "Marcus Chen! Oh my goodness, look at you! You look so mature." Her eyes swept over his broad shoulders and the scars visible on his arms. "We're all so proud of you, honey. What you did out there. It's just incredible." She handed him his schedule and a map of the school, even though he could probably navigate it blindfolded. His first class was AP American History with Mr. Brennan. The hallways were exactly as he remembered. Same lockers, same trophy cases, same motivational posters about believing in yourself. But everything felt miniature, like he was walking through a dollhouse. He found room 204 and hesitated outside the door. Through the window, he could see students his age taking notes, raising hands, engaged in discussions about historical events that felt ancient to him now. Events that happened before humans had even left their own solar system. Marcus took a deep breath and opened the door. Every head in the classroom turned toward him. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. 20 pairs of eyes stared at him with mixtures of curiosity, admiration, and something that might have been fear. Mr. Brennan, a thin man with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses, smiled warmly. "Ah, you must be Marcus Chen. Class, we have a very special student joining us today. Marcus just returned from serving in the Galactic Defense Corps." A ripple of whispers went through the room. Marcus caught fragments. "That's the guy who saw him on the news. Killed like 100 aliens. Please, take a seat anywhere," Mr. Brennan said, gesturing to the empty desks. Marcus chose a seat in the back corner, a habit from military training. Always know your exits. Always have a clear view of potential threats. His eyes automatically scanned the room, cataloging windows, doors, and anything that could be used as a weapon. "Now, where were we?" Mr. Brennan turned back to the whiteboard. "Ah, yes. We were discussing the causes of World War II, the tensions that led to global conflict." Marcus almost laughed. They were studying a war that happened over 80 years ago, where the most advanced weapons were crude explosives and metal bullets. Meanwhile, he'd fought in battles where entire planets hung in the balance, where weapons could crack open moons. A girl with blonde hair in the seat next to him leaned over and whispered, "Is it true you killed a Zephyrian warlord with just a knife?" Marcus looked at her. She couldn't have been more than 17, with bright blue eyes full of excitement and innocence. She had no idea what she was asking about. "Something like that," he said quietly. She grinned like he'd just told her he was a movie star. That's so cool, you're like famous. Cool. She thought watching a sentient being die was cool. Marcus turned away and tried to focus on Mr. Brennan's lecture about economic factors leading to the rise of fascism. But his mind kept drifting to other battles, other faces, other choices that couldn't be undone. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of introductions and stares. In AP Chemistry, Mrs. Rodriguez explained molecular bonding, while Marcus thought about the chemical composition of Zephyrian blood. In Advanced Calculus, Mr. Thompson worked through derivatives while Marcus calculated blast radiuses and orbital trajectories in his head. Lunch was the worst part. The cafeteria was a chaos of voices and movement that set his nerves on edge. He took his tray to an empty table in the corner, but within minutes he was surrounded by curious classmates. What's space food like? Do aliens really have acid for blood? How many kills did you get? Is it true you saved like 10,000 people? Did you ever get scared? Marcus answered their questions with one-word responses or shrugs, but they kept coming. More students gathered around his table, turning him into some kind of exhibition. The noise level rose as more people tried to get his attention, ask their questions, prove they'd talk to the war hero. The cafeteria started to feel like a trap. Too many people, too many voices, too many variables to track. His breathing grew shallow. His hands started to shake slightly. The walls felt like they were closing in. Did you ever torture any prisoners? That last question cut through the noise like a blade. Marcus looked up to see a skinny kid with dark hair and cruel eyes. Tyler Morrison. Marcus remembered him from freshman year, back when Tyler was just an annoying class clown. Now he wore expensive clothes and an arrogant smirk. What did you say? Marcus's voice was quiet, dangerous. I asked if you ever tortured prisoners. My dad says that's what soldiers really do in wars. Torture and murder civilians. The cafeteria grew quieter as other students sensed the tension. Marcus stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. Tyler was maybe 5'8" and probably weighed 140 pounds soaking wet. Marcus was 6'2" and pure muscle from 3 years of military conditioning. Your dad doesn't know what he's talking about, Marcus said evenly. Tyler's smirk widened. Touched a nerve, did I? My dad says soldiers like you come back all messed up in the head. PTSD cases who can't handle normal life anymore. Something cold and hard settled in Marcus's chest. His hands clenched into fists. He'd faced down alien warriors twice Tyler's size, but somehow this scrawny teenager's words hit harder than any plasma blast. You want to know what I did out there? Marcus took a step forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. You really want to know? Tyler's smirk faltered as he realized he might have pushed too far. The other students backed away, sensing danger. I watched good people die, Marcus continued, his eyes locked on Tyler's. I held my best friend while he bled out in my arms. I made choices that kept thousands of people alive, including spoiled little kids like you who get to sit here and judge me from safety. Tyler's face had gone pale. I didn't mean... No, you did mean it. You wanted to provoke the damaged soldier, see if you could make him snap. Marcus took another step forward. Well, congratulations. You succeeded. For a moment that stretched like eternity, Marcus felt the familiar weight of violence in his hands. The urge to solve problems the way he'd been trained to solve them. Quick, decisive, final. Then he saw the fear in Tyler's eyes. Real fear, not the manufactured bravado of a teenager trying to look tough. Tyler was just a kid, a stupid, ignorant kid who had no idea what real violence looked like. Marcus stepped back, unclenching his fists. Stay away from me, he said quietly, then turned and walked out of the cafeteria. He ended up in the empty gymnasium, sitting alone on the bleachers. The smell of floor wax and old sweat brought back memories of basketball practice, of simpler times when his biggest worry was making the varsity team. "There you are," a voice echoed across the gym. Marcus looked up to see a woman in her 30s walking toward him. She had short brown hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "I'm Dr. Sarah Walsh," she said, sitting down next to him. "I'm the school counselor. I heard about what happened at lunch." "I didn't touch him." "I know. That's actually what impressed me." She studied his profile. "You showed remarkable restraint. A lot of people wouldn't have been able to stop themselves." Marcus said nothing. "This is hard," Dr. Walsh continued. "Coming back to a world that doesn't understand what you've been through. Trying to fit into a life that doesn't fit anymore. You have no idea what I've been through." "You're right, I don't. But I've worked with other veterans. Older ones, from different conflicts. But the feelings are often similar. The isolation. The sense that you're different from everyone around you. The way normal problems seem trivial after what you've seen." Marcus glanced at her. "So what's your advice? Just pretend none of it happened?" "No, never that. What you did out there matters. The lives you saved, the sacrifices you made, they're real and important. But so is this. Your life now, your future. You get to choose what comes next." "What if I don't know how to choose?" Dr. Walsh smiled sadly. "Then you take it one day at a time. You find ways to bridge who you were with who you are now. And you remember that being different doesn't mean being broken." The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch. Students would be heading to their next classes, back to their normal lives and normal problems. Marcus would have to join them, sit in another classroom, pretend to care about subjects that felt meaningless. But maybe Dr. Walsh was right. Maybe he could find a way to bridge his two worlds. "Thanks," he said quietly. She nodded and stood up. "My door's always open, Marcus. Anytime you need to talk." As she walked away, Marcus sat alone in the gymnasium and tried to imagine a future where he belonged somewhere again. It felt impossible right now, but then again, so had surviving the Battle of Kepler 442b. He'd done impossible things before. Maybe he could do it again. The rest of the day passed more quietly. Word had spread about the incident in the cafeteria, and most students gave him a wider berth. Some looked at him with fear, others with respect, but the carnival atmosphere from the morning was gone. In his last class of the day, AP Physics with Mrs. Chen, no relation, despite the shared name, they were studying basic orbital mechanics. The teacher was explaining Kepler's laws of planetary motion, concepts Marcus had used to calculate real spacecraft trajectories during combat operations. "Can anyone tell me what would happen if we tried to establish a stable orbit around a binary star system?" Mrs. Chen asked. Marcus raised his hand without thinking. "Yes, Marcus? It depends on the mass ratio and separation distance of the binary pair. If the stars are close enough and similar in mass, you could establish a stable orbit around both stars as a single gravitational center. But if they're too far apart or too different in mass, the gravitational perturbations would destabilize any planetary orbit over time." The classroom was silent. Mrs. Chen stared at him with surprise. That's exactly right. Very advanced thinking for someone who hasn't taken this class before." A student in the front row turned around. "How did you know that?" Marcus realized his mistake. I read about it somewhere." But the damage was done. Once again he was different, set apart, the student who knew things he shouldn't know, who had experiences they couldn't understand. When the final bell rang, Marcus walked out of the school building feeling more alone than he had in the depths of space. At least in the military, everyone around him shared the same experiences, the same language, the same understanding of what mattered. Here, he was an alien in his own world. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "How was your first day? Can't wait to hear all about it. Marcus stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "It was fine." But as he walked toward the parking lot where his father waited to drive him home, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this was going to be the hardest battle he'd ever fought. And unlike the war in space, he wasn't sure he could win this one. 2 weeks into his return to high school, Marcus had established a routine that kept him sane. Wake up at 500 hours out of habit, even though school didn't start until 8 a.m. Run 5 miles through the neighborhood streets while most people still slept. Shower, eat breakfast in silence while his parents tried to make conversation, then endure 7 hours of academic purgatory. He'd learned to tune out the whispers that followed him through the hallways, the way conversations stopped when he walked by, the mixture of awe and fear in his classmates' eyes. Most days he felt like a museum exhibit, the war hero, observed from a safe distance. But today was different. Today, Principal Martinez had made an announcement during morning homeroom that made Marcus's blood run cold. This Thursday, we'll be hosting a special Veterans Day assembly to honor our local heroes, including our very own Marcus Chen. Marcus will be speaking about his experiences serving our great nation in the Galactic Defense Corps. Marcus stared at the intercom speaker, his hands clenching his desk so hard his knuckles went white. He hadn't agreed to speak. Nobody had even asked him. After homeroom, he stormed into Principal Martinez's office without knocking. "I'm not giving a speech," he said flatly. Principal Martinez, a short man with thinning hair and a nervous disposition, looked up from his paperwork with surprise. "Marcus, I was hoping you'd stop by. I know this is short notice, but we really think it would be inspiring for the other students to hear about your service." I said no. "But Marcus, you're a hero. The students need to hear about courage and sacrifice, and you have no idea what you're asking me to talk about." Marcus's voice was low, dangerous. "You want me to stand up there and tell a bunch of kids about watching people die, about making choices that haunt me every night?" Principal Martinez's face flushed. "Well, obviously you'd keep it appropriate for a high school audience. Focus on the positive aspects: patriotism, duty, honor." Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The positive aspects. Marcus, I understand you might have some difficult memories, but surely you can share the inspiring parts of your service. How you saved lives, protected innocent people. And what about the lives I took? What about the innocent people I couldn't save? You want me to mention them too?" The principal looked uncomfortable now. "Perhaps you could speak with the school counselor about this. I'm sure Dr. Walsh could help you prepare something suitable." "I'm not giving a speech," Marcus repeated, then turned and walked out. But the damage was already done. The announcement had been made. Flyers were already being printed. The local news had been contacted. Westfield High's war hero was going to share his inspiring story with the community. At lunch, Marcus sat alone at his usual table, picking at a sandwich he couldn't taste. The cafeteria buzzed with excited conversations about the upcoming assembly. Students kept glancing his way, probably wondering what amazing war stories he'd share. "Mind if I sit?" Marcus looked up to see a girl he recognized from his AP literature class, Emma Rodriguez. She was quiet, kept to herself mostly, always had a book with her. She'd never bothered him with questions about the war. "Free country," he said. Emma sat down across from him, setting her own lunch tray on the table. For a few minutes, they ate in silence. It was comfortable, which surprised him. Most people felt the need to fill every quiet moment with words. "My brother came back from Afghanistan 2 years ago," she said quietly. Marcus paused mid-chew. "Army? Marines. 3rd deployment. IED got his squad on patrol outside Kabul. He was the only one who made it." Marcus set down his sandwich. "I'm sorry." He didn't talk for 3 months after he got home. Just sat in his room, staring at the wall. My parents tried to get him to see therapists, but he refused, said they couldn't understand. Did he ever? Marcus struggled with the words. Did he get better? Emma's smile was sad. Better is complicated. He's functional now, has a job at an auto shop, talks to us again. But he's different. The person who left for the war isn't the person who came back. Your point? Just that you don't have to pretend to be okay, and you don't owe anyone your story if you're not ready to tell it? Marcus studied her face. She had dark eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and something in her expression reminded him of the military chaplain who used to visit their forward operating base, someone who'd seen enough pain to understand it. What does your brother do when people ask him about it? He tells them that some stories aren't meant for entertainment. That afternoon, Marcus found himself in Dr. Walsh's office. She'd been expecting him. Rough day? She asked as he slumped into the chair across from her desk. They want me to perform like a trained SEAL. I heard about the assembly. Principal Martinez mentioned you weren't enthusiastic about speaking. Would you be? Standing up in front of a bunch of teenagers and adults who think war is like a video game or a movie? Dr. Walsh leaned back in her chair. What do you think they expect to hear? Heroes and villains. Good guys winning, bad guys losing. Clean endings where everyone learns something and feels better about themselves. And what would you tell them if you could be completely honest? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. That war isn't noble or glorious. It's necessary sometimes, but it's never clean. That I did things I'm proud of and things that make me sick. That I saved people and failed to save people, and both of those things change you in ways you can't undo. Those sound like important truths. Those aren't the truths they want to hear. Dr. Walsh nodded. You're probably right. People prefer simple stories. But maybe that's exactly why they need to hear the complicated ones. So you think I should do it? I think you should do whatever feels right for you. If speaking helps you process your experiences, then it might be worth considering. If it feels like exploitation or re-traumatization, then you have every right to refuse. Marcus left her office more confused than when he'd entered. Part of him wanted to tell his story, the real story, to make people understand what war actually cost, what choices looked like when there were no good options. But another part of him wanted to keep that pain private, to protect both himself and the innocents who didn't need that burden. That evening at dinner, his parents brought up the assembly. We're so proud of you, honey, his mother said, passing him the mashed potatoes. The whole community is excited to hear about your service. I haven't agreed to speak yet. His father set down his fork. Marcus, son, this is an honor. People want to thank you, to hear about the good you did out there. The good I did? Marcus pushed food around his plate. What if I told them about Corporal Jenkins, who died because I made the wrong call during an evacuation? What if I described what a plasma burn looks like or how it sounds when someone suffocates in a breached spacesuit? The table went silent. His mother's face had gone pale. Marcus, his father said carefully, we know it wasn't all heroic moments. We know you saw terrible things. But surely there were positive experiences too. Times when you made a difference? Every choice I made had consequences. Every life I saved meant someone else didn't make it home. Every victory came with a cost that civilians can't understand and shouldn't have to carry. His mother reached across the table and took his hand. Sweetheart, we just want people to understand how special you are, how brave. I'm not brave, Mom. I was terrified most of the time. I just kept moving because stopping meant dying, and dying meant my squad died too. That night, Marcus lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the two quiet suburban sounds outside his window. In the distance, he could hear a dog barking and the hum of traffic on the highway. Normal sounds, peaceful sounds. Sounds that should have been comforting, but instead reminded him how far he was from the world where he'd learned to survive. His phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. "Hey, this is Emma from lunch. Got your number from the student directory. Hope that's okay. Just wanted you to know that whatever you decide about Thursday, it's your choice. Don't let them pressure you into performing trauma for their entertainment." Marcus stared at the message for a long time before typing back. "How did your brother finally start talking again?" The reply came quickly. "He met another vet at the auto shop, someone who got it. They don't talk about the war, but they don't have to. Understanding doesn't always need words." "Does he regret coming back?" "No, but he says the hardest part wasn't surviving the war. It was learning how to live after it." Marcus set his phone aside and rolled over, pulling his pillow over his head. But sleep wouldn't come. Every time he closed his eyes, he was back on the transport ship, watching Earth grow larger through the viewport, wondering if he'd ever feel human again. Wednesday morning brought another complication. As Marcus walked into first period, he found Tyler Morrison waiting by his desk with a smug expression. "Ready for your big speech tomorrow, war hero?" Marcus ignored him and took his seat. "I've been doing some research," Tyler continued, loud enough for other students to hear, "about what really happens in these galactic wars. My uncle works for a journalist who covers military stuff." "Tyler, sit down," Mr. Brennan called from the front of the room. But Tyler wasn't finished. "Did you know that 70% of Galactic Defense Corps veterans come back with psychological problems, and that there have been multiple incidents of war crimes during the Zephyrian conflict?" The classroom had gone dead silent. Marcus felt every eye on him waiting for his reaction. "My uncle says the military covers up a lot of stuff. Makes heroes out of people who might have done some pretty dark things out there in space where nobody's watching." Marcus stood up slowly. His chair made a scraping sound against the floor that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet room. "Tyler," Mr. Brennan's voice was sharp now, "that's enough." But Tyler was on a roll. "I'm just saying, maybe we shouldn't be so quick to celebrate people just because they wear a uniform. Maybe we should ask what they really did to earn those medals." Marcus walked over to Tyler's desk. The other boy was trying to maintain his cocky expression, but his eyes showed nervousness. "You want to know what I really did?" Marcus's voice was quiet, controlled. "I held the line at Firebase Omega while evacuation ships lifted off civilians. I carried wounded Marines through enemy fire because leaving them behind wasn't an option. I made decisions in seconds that generals spend months planning because hesitation meant people died." He leaned down, bringing his face level with Tyler's. "I also killed 17 sentient beings in personal combat. I watched good people die because of orders I gave. I made choices that saved thousands and damned dozens, and I live with all of it every single day." Tyler's face had gone white. I didn't mean..." "Yes, you did. You meant to tear me down because seeing someone who's done things you can't imagine makes you feel small. But here's what you don't understand. I already tear myself down every night. You can't say anything to me that I haven't already said to myself." Marcus straightened up and looked around the classroom at faces full of shock, fear, and something that might have been understanding. "So yes, Tyler, I have psychological problems. Yes, I did dark things in the name of protecting people who will never know the cost. And tomorrow, if I choose to speak, I'll tell everyone exactly that. Because the truth is more important than comfortable lies." He grabbed his backpack and walked out of the classroom, leaving behind a silence so complete it felt like vacuum. Word spread quickly through the school. By lunch, everyone knew that Marcus Chen had finally cracked, had admitted to being a killer, had confirmed what some people suspected about veterans. The whispers followed him everywhere, but now they had a different quality. Less awe, more unease. Marcus found Emma in the library during lunch, reading alone at a corner table. "Mind if I hide out here for a while?" She looked up from her book. "Heard you had an interesting morning." "News travels fast." Tyler's been telling anyone who will listen that you threatened him. He's playing the victim pretty hard. Marcus sank into a chair across from her. Maybe I did threaten him. Maybe he's right to be scared of me. Emma closed her book and leaned forward. My brother told me something once. He said the difference between a soldier and a killer is that a soldier carries the weight of what they've done. A killer doesn't. How much weight is too much to carry? I don't know, but I know that carrying it alone makes it heavier. That afternoon, Marcus made his decision. He walked into Principal Martinez's office without knocking again. I'll speak at the assembly, he said. Principal Martinez looked up with surprise and relief. Marcus, that's wonderful. Now I've prepared some talking points about patriotism and service that I think would be appropriate. No, Marcus cut him off. I'll speak on my terms about what I choose to share. You don't get to script this. Well, we do need to make sure the content is appropriate for our audience. The content will be honest. If that's not appropriate, then maybe you should reconsider having the assembly at all. The principal looked uncomfortable. Marcus, I understand you want to be authentic, but we have younger students attending. We need to keep things inspiring. Truth is inspiring, even when it's hard truth. I'm not sure the school board would approve of graphic content or anything that might be upsetting to our families. Marcus leaned forward. Then here's what I'll do. I'll speak about service and sacrifice and the cost of protecting others. I'll be honest about what war really means. And if you don't like it, you can cut the microphone. But you don't get to put words in my mouth. Principal Martinez shifted uncomfortably. I suppose, as long as you keep it appropriate. Appropriate is subjective. I'll keep it true. Thursday morning arrived gray and cold, matching Marcus's mood. The gymnasium was packed with students, teachers, parents, and local officials. Someone had hung red, white, and blue bunting around the stage. A banner reading "Honoring Our Heroes" stretched across the back wall. Marcus sat in a folding chair on the stage, wearing his dress uniform for the first time since coming home. The medals felt heavier than he remembered. His parents sat in the front row, his mother beaming with pride, his father looking nervous. Principal Martinez gave a long introduction full of flowery language about service and sacrifice. He mentioned Marcus's decorations, his age when he enlisted, the lives he'd saved. All true, but somehow it sounded like he was describing someone else. And now, Principal Martinez concluded, please welcome home our hero, Marcus Chen. The applause was thunderous. Marcus stood and walked to the podium, looking out at hundreds of faces full of expectation. They wanted inspiration. They wanted to feel good about the world, about the choices their country made, about the wars fought in their name. He gripped the podium and began to speak. 3 years ago, I was sitting in these same seats, listening to some adult tell me about the importance of education and following my dreams. I had plans for college, for a normal life. Then the Zephyrians attacked Kepler 442b, and suddenly normal seemed less important than necessary. The crowd was listening intently. So far, this sounded like the inspiring story they expected. I enlisted because I believed in something bigger than myself, because I couldn't stand by while innocent people died. That part was easy. The hard part was everything that came after. Marcus paused, scanning the faces in front of him. He saw Tyler Morrison sitting with his arms crossed, probably hoping Marcus would say something that would get him in trouble. He saw Emma Rodriguez near the back, watching with understanding eyes. He saw his parents, holding hands, trusting him to make them proud. You want to know about heroes? Here's what I learned. Heroes aren't people who aren't afraid. Heroes are people who are terrified and do what needs doing anyway. Heroes make impossible choices with incomplete information and live with the consequences forever. The gymnasium was completely silent now. Even the younger students had stopped fidgeting. I saved lives, that's true. But I also took them. I made decisions that meant some people came home and others didn't. I carry the weight of every choice, every face, every moment when I could have done something different. He could see Principal Martinez shifting uncomfortably in his chair on the stage. This wasn't the speech they'd wanted. The media calls me the miracle of Kepler. But miracles are easy explanations for complicated realities. What happened on Kepler 442b wasn't miraculous. It was necessary. It was brutal. It was a group of terrified young people doing whatever it took to keep innocent civilians alive. Marcus's voice grew stronger as he continued. You want to honor veterans? Then understand that we don't come back unchanged. We don't come back as the same people who left. Service costs something, and pretending it doesn't dishonors everyone who's ever paid that price. The silence in the gymnasium was complete now. Some faces looked uncomfortable, others thoughtful. A few people were crying. I'm not a hero because I wasn't afraid. I'm not a hero because I enjoyed what I had to do. I'm not even a hero because I was good at it. If I'm a hero at all, it's because I was willing to carry burdens that others shouldn't have to bear. He looked directly at his parents. I came back different. I'll always be different. And that's okay. Because the alternative was not coming back at all, and leaving those burdens for someone else. Marcus stepped away from the podium. The applause started slowly, uncertain, then grew stronger. It wasn't the thunderous celebration from his introduction. It was something quieter, more thoughtful. The sound of people grappling with truths they hadn't expected to hear. As he left the stage, Marcus caught Emma's eye. She nodded once, a small gesture that somehow meant everything. The rest of the day passed in a blur of conversations. Some students avoided him completely now, unsettled by his honesty. Others approached him with questions that showed they were actually thinking about what he'd said. Teachers looked at him differently, less like a curiosity and more like a person carrying something heavy. Tyler Morrison was nowhere to be found. After school, Marcus walked out to the parking lot where his father waited by the car. David's expression was thoughtful, complicated. That wasn't the speech they expected, his father said as Marcus got into the passenger seat. No, it wasn't. But it was the speech you needed to give. Marcus looked at his father with surprise. You're not disappointed? Disappointed? Marcus, I've never been prouder of you, not for the medals, not for the news stories, for having the courage to tell the truth when it would have been easier to lie. They drove home in comfortable silence. For the first time since coming back, Marcus felt like he'd managed to bridge the gap between who he'd been and who he'd become. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't complete, but it was a start. That evening, his phone buzzed with a text from Emma. My brother wants to meet you, if you're interested. No pressure. Marcus stared at the message for a long time before responding. Yeah, I'd like that. Maybe Dr. Walsh was right. Maybe understanding didn't always need words. Maybe sometimes it was enough to know you weren't carrying your burdens alone. Outside his bedroom window, the suburban neighborhood settled into its quiet evening routine. Dogs barked, cars pulled into driveways, families sat down to dinner. Normal life, continuing its pattern. But for the first time since coming home, Marcus felt like he might have a place in that normal life. Changed, complicated, carrying invisible scars, but still part of the world he'd fought to protect. It wasn't the ending he'd imagined when he enlisted, but it was real, and it was his, and maybe that was enough. 6 weeks after the Veterans Day assembly, Marcus had developed an unexpected routine. Every Tuesday and Thursday after school, he met with Emma's brother Carlos at Murphy's auto shop on the east side of town. They didn't talk much about their respective wars, earthbound and galactic. Instead, they worked on engines, changed oil, and fixed transmissions while classic rock played from a paint-splattered radio. It was therapeutic in a way Marcus hadn't expected. There was something honest about mechanical work, about problems that had clear solutions and parts that either worked or didn't. No moral ambiguity in a broken alternator. No life-or-death consequences in replacing brake pads. "Hand me that socket wrench," Carlos said from beneath the hood of a 2019 Honda Civic. Marcus passed him the tool, noting how Carlos's hands shook slightly whenever he had to reach into tight spaces. 3 years back from Afghanistan, and enclosed spaces still triggered his anxiety. They'd never talked about it, but Marcus understood. His own hands shook when unexpected loud noises echoed through the shop. "You planning to finish high school?" Carlos asked, his voice muffled by the engine compartment. "That's the idea." "College after?" Marcus shrugged, even though Carlos couldn't see him. "Haven't thought that far ahead." "My advice? Don't rush it. Take time to figure out who you are now before you decide who you want to become." It was the most personal thing Carlos had ever said to him. Marcus filed it away to think about later. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Student council meeting today about winter formal. You should consider going. Not as a date thing, just normal teenage experience." Marcus almost laughed. Emma had become his unofficial guide to normal teenage experiences over the past month. She'd convinced him to try eating lunch in the cafeteria again instead of hiding in the library. She'd gotten him to join the current events club, where his unique perspective on galactic politics actually proved useful. Small steps toward feeling human again. But a formal dance felt like too much. Too many people, too much noise, too many opportunities for things to go wrong. He texted back, "Not really my scene." Her reply was immediate. "Neither is high school, but you're doing it anyway. Consider it a different kind of mission." That afternoon, Marcus found himself in the student council meeting almost against his better judgment. The classroom was packed with enthusiastic teenagers debating themes and decorations for the winter formal. Their energy was exhausting. "What about Starlight Serenade?" suggested Jenny Walsh, the student body president. "We could have twinkling lights everywhere and maybe some space-themed decorations to honor Marcus." Every head in the room turned toward him. Marcus felt his stomach clench. "Please don't." "But it would be so cool," Jenny continued. "We could have, like, model spaceships and maybe some alien props." I said no. Marcus's voice was sharper than he intended. The room went quiet. Emma jumped in smoothly. "What about Winter Wonderland? Classic, elegant, and we could use the budget for good lighting instead of expensive props." The conversation moved on, but Marcus noticed the way some students were looking at him now. The damaged veteran who couldn't handle a simple themed dance. He was starting to regret coming when Tyler Morrison walked into the room. Tyler had been avoiding him since the assembly, which suited Marcus fine. But now the smaller boy made a beeline for the empty seat next to Marcus with a determined expression. "We need to talk," Tyler said quietly. "No, we don't." "Yes, we do. After the meeting." Marcus studied Tyler's face. The cocky arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked like guilt mixed with genuine uncertainty. "Fine, but make it quick." The rest of the meeting dragged on with debates about DJ versus live band, formal versus semi-formal dress codes, and whether to allow underclassmen to attend. Marcus contributed nothing to the discussions, but he stayed until the end, partly out of stubbornness and partly because Emma kept shooting him encouraging looks. When the room finally emptied, Tyler lingered by the door until only he and Marcus remained. "I owe you an apology," Tyler said without preamble. Marcus packed his backpack slowly. "Okay." "No, I mean it. What I said before, the way I kept pushing, it was stupid and wrong." "Yeah, it was." Tyler fidgeted with his car keys. "My dad's been deployed 3 times. Army National Guard. I grew up hearing about how the military changes people, but I never really thought about what that meant until I heard your speech." Marcus looked up with surprise. "Your dad's military?" "Yeah. He came back from his last deployment about 2 years ago. Different. Quiet. My mom says he has nightmares sometimes. Tyler's voice dropped to almost a whisper. I think maybe I was angry at you because you reminded me of him, of how scared I am that he'll never be the same person who used to throw footballs with me in the backyard. The honesty in Tyler's voice caught Marcus off guard. Is that why you've been such an ass? Partially. Also because I'm 17 and stupid and thought picking on the war hero would make me look tough. Tyler managed a weak smile. Turns out it just made me look like a scared kid taking his problems out on someone who didn't deserve it. Marcus stood and shouldered his backpack. Your dad ever talk about it? The deployments? Not really. He just says some things are better left in the past. Maybe. Or maybe he just doesn't know how to talk about it without scaring people. Tyler considered this. Would you be willing to meet him sometime? I know it's a weird ask, but I think he might relate to someone who's been through what you've been through. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. 6 weeks ago, he would have refused immediately. The idea of discussing his experiences with a stranger, even a fellow veteran, would have felt like opening old wounds. But something had changed since he'd started meeting with Carlos. Yeah, he said finally. I'd be willing to talk to him. Relief flooded Tyler's face. Really? Thank you. I know it's not your responsibility to help my family, but we help each other when we can, Marcus said. That's what people do. Walking out of the school that day, Marcus reflected on how much his perspective had shifted. 2 months ago, he'd felt like an alien visitor in his own world. Now, he was beginning to see connection points, ways to bridge the gap between his experiences and the lives of people around him. His phone rang as he reached the parking lot. Emma's name appeared on the screen. Hey, he answered. So, verdict on winter formal planning? Painful but survivable, like most high school experiences, she laughed. Progress. Speaking of which, I have a proposition for you. I'm listening. Go to the dance with me. Not as a romantic thing, she added quickly. More like moral support. 2 people who don't really fit in but are trying anyway. Marcus stopped walking. Emma, before you say no, consider this. You've been working really hard to rejoin normal life. This is about as normal and teenage as it gets. Plus, I promise to rescue you if anyone asks you to share war stories. Why do you want to go with me? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Because I think we both deserve a night where we're not defined by our damage, where we can just be 2 people at a dance, awkward and uncomfortable like everyone else our age. Marcus found himself smiling despite his reservations. You're really not going to let this go, are you? I can be very persistent when I believe in something. And you believe in me going to a high school dance? I believe in you figuring out that you still get to have normal experiences, even after everything you've been through. You don't have to let the war define your entire life. That evening at dinner, Marcus surprised his parents by bringing up the winter formal. A dance? His mother's face lit up. Oh, honey, that's wonderful. Who are you going with? Emma Rodriguez. She's in my literature class. Is she your girlfriend? His father asked with poorly concealed hope. She's my friend. We're going together as friends. Sarah clapped her hands together. This is so exciting. We need to get you a tuxedo and maybe a corsage for Emma and... Mom, slow down. It's just a dance. But even as he said it, Marcus realized it wasn't just anything. For him, agreeing to go to winter formal was a declaration of intent, a decision to participate in the world he'd fought to protect, rather than just surviving on its margins. The next few weeks passed in a blur of academic work and social preparation. Marcus found himself actually engaging in classroom discussions, particularly in AP current events, where his knowledge of galactic politics proved invaluable. His teacher, Mrs. Patterson, started calling on him regularly to provide perspective on interstellar conflicts and alien cultures. Marcus, you mentioned yesterday that the Zephyrian military structure is based on biological castes. Can you expand on how that affects their strategic decision-making? He'd learned to answer these questions matter-of-factly, without the emotional weight that had characterized his early attempts to discuss his experiences. The academic distance made it easier to share information without reliving trauma. Zephyrian battle commanders are literally bred for aggression and tactical thinking, while their diplomatic caste is engineered for negotiation and long-term planning. It means their military operations tend to be extremely effective in short-term engagements but poorly coordinated with their political objectives. His classmates listened with genuine interest, rather than morbid curiosity, understanding rather than entertainment. 2 days before the winter formal, Marcus met Tyler's father at a coffee shop downtown. Staff Sergeant Robert Morrison was a compact man with graying temples and the same nervous energy as his son. He ordered black coffee and sat across from Marcus with military posture. "Tyler tells me you served in the Galactic Corps," Morrison said without preamble. 3 years. Infantry, mostly forward reconnaissance. Morrison nodded. "I did convoy security in Afghanistan. Different wars, but some things don't change." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, each man recognizing something familiar in the other. "Tyler's worried about me," Morrison said finally. "He's worried about you changing, about not being the father he remembers." "Am I that obvious?" Marcus shrugged. "I went through the same thing with my parents. Still am in some ways. They want me to be who I was before I left. And? I can't be that person anymore. But I'm learning I can still be their son. Just differently." Morrison stirred his coffee thoughtfully. "The nightmares are the worst part. Tyler's mother thinks I don't know she lies awake listening for them, but I do. You talk to anyone about them? Military counselors, they help some. But it's hard to explain to people who weren't there." Marcus leaned forward. "There's a guy I know, Carlos Rodriguez, Afghanistan vet who works at Murphy's auto shop. We don't talk therapy, but we understand each other. Sometimes that's enough." "You think he'd be willing to meet someone new?" "I think he'd understand why you might need someone to not talk to about it." Morrison's smile was the first genuine expression Marcus had seen from him. "That might be exactly what I need." The night of winter formal, Marcus stood in front of his bedroom mirror adjusting his tie for the 5th time. The rented tuxedo fit well enough, but he felt like he was wearing a costume. The formal clothes were so far removed from both his military uniforms and his current civilian wardrobe that he barely recognized himself. His mother appeared in the doorway with tears in her eyes. "You look so handsome." "It's just a dance, Mom." "No, it's not." She stepped into the room and straightened his tie with practiced maternal efficiency. "It's you choosing to be part of the world again. And that's everything." The drive to Emma's house was nerve-wracking in ways that facing alien warriors had never been. Combat was familiar territory now. Social events with his teenage peers felt like navigating an alien culture without a translator. Emma answered the door wearing a simple blue dress that somehow made her look both elegant and approachable. She'd done something different with her hair, and her usual wire-rimmed glasses had been replaced with contacts. "You clean up nice," she said with a grin. "So do you." The drive to the school was filled with comfortable conversation about everything except the dance itself. Emma had a gift for putting him at ease, for making abnormal situations feel manageable. The gymnasium had been transformed with twinkling lights and fabric draping that actually did create something like a winter wonderland. Students in formal wear clustered in groups, talking and laughing and taking pictures. The DJ was playing something current that Marcus didn't recognize, but that seemed to energize the crowd. "Second thoughts?" Emma asked as they stood in the doorway. "Third and fourth thoughts. Want to leave?" Marcus surveyed the scene. A month ago, The noise and crowd would have triggered his anxiety immediately. Tonight, it just felt like a high school dance. Slightly overwhelming, but fundamentally harmless. "No," he said. "Let's do this." The next 2 hours were surprisingly enjoyable. Marcus and Emma spent most of their time talking with other couples, dancing awkwardly to songs they both claimed not to know, and making sarcastic comments about the overly elaborate decorations. He was surprised by how many classmates approached him not with questions about the war, but with normal teenage conversation about classes and weekend plans and college applications. For the first time since coming home, he felt like a high school senior rather than a military veteran playing dress-up. "Having fun?" Emma asked during a slow song. "More than I expected," Marcus admitted. "Thank you for talking me into this." "You talked yourself into it. I just provided motivation." As the song ended, Principal Martinez approached them with a somewhat nervous expression. "Marcus, Emma, you both look wonderful tonight. I hope you're having a good time." "We are, thank you," Emma replied smoothly. "Marcus, I wanted to thank you again for your speech at the Veterans Day Assembly. We received a lot of positive feedback from the community. Very thoughtful, very honest." Marcus nodded. "Good. In fact, the school board has asked me to extend an invitation for you to speak at graduation in June as our student veteran representative." Emma squeezed Marcus's arm in warning, probably sensing his immediate urge to refuse. "Can I think about it?" Marcus asked. "Of course, no pressure at all. Just consider it. Your perspective would mean a lot to your graduating class." As Principal Martinez walked away, Emma looked at Marcus with raised eyebrows. "Graduation speech?" "Apparently. You going to do it?" Marcus watched his classmates dancing and laughing around them. 6 months ago, the idea of addressing his graduating class would have been unthinkable. Now, "Maybe," he said. "Ask me in June." The dance ended with the traditional playing of "Don't Stop Believin'," while everyone sang along badly and took final pictures. Marcus found himself actually participating, his voice joining the off-key chorus of teenagers celebrating the end of another successful high school social event. Outside in the parking lot, as couples said their goodbyes and headed to after-parties, Marcus and Emma sat on the hood of his car looking up at the stars. "So," Emma said, "on a scale of 1 to 10, how traumatic was that?" "Maybe a 3, possibly even a 2. "Progress." Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking about how the evening had felt. Normal, teenage, human. "Emma," he said finally, "thank you." "For what?" "For seeing who I could be instead of just who I was." She smiled and bumped his shoulder with hers. "That's what friends do." Above them, the stars shone with the same light Marcus had seen from military transports and alien battlefields. But tonight, they looked different, less like distant points of conflict and more like possibilities, like futures he might actually get to experience. 2 weeks later, Marcus received an unexpected visitor at school. A young woman in a Galactic Defense Corps uniform waited for him outside his AP Literature class. "Marcus Chen?" She had lieutenant's bars on her shoulders and the bearing of someone accustomed to command. "Yes, ma'am." "Lieutenant Sarah Kim, GDC Recruitment Division. I'd like to speak with you about an opportunity." Marcus felt his stomach clench. "I've served my time, Lieutenant. This isn't about re-enlistment. Could we talk privately?" They found an empty classroom, and Lieutenant Kim got straight to business. "The Corps is developing a new program for veteran integration, helping soldiers transition back to civilian life, particularly younger veterans who face unique challenges. We're looking for someone with your experience and perspective to help design the curriculum." "I'm still in high school." "We're aware. This would be a part-time consultation position. Flexible schedule, no travel required unless you choose it." "The program is badly needed, Marcus. Too many young veterans are struggling with the transition." Marcus thought about Tyler's father, about Carlos's shaking hands, about his own sleepless nights and anxiety attacks. What would it involve? Working with military psychologists and social workers to develop better transition programs. Sharing your experiences to help create resources for other veterans. Making sure the next group of soldiers who come home have better support than you did. It wasn't a combat mission, but it felt like service, like a way to transform his struggles into something useful for others. I'll need to think about it. Of course, take your time. But Marcus, Lieutenant Kim's expression softened slightly. What you've already done, speaking honestly about your experiences, sharing your story with your community, that's exactly the kind of perspective we need. That evening, Marcus discussed the offer with his parents over dinner. "It sounds wonderful," his mother said. "A way to help other young people going through what you went through." "But you don't have to decide anything right now," his father added. "You're still figuring out your own path." Marcus nodded, but privately he thought he already knew his answer. The idea of helping other veterans navigate the transition from military to civilian life felt right in a way that nothing had since coming home. 3 months later, at graduation, Marcus stood behind the podium looking out at his assembled classmates. The gym was packed with families and friends, all there to celebrate this milestone in young lives just beginning. "A year ago," he began, "I thought my life was over. Not ended, but completed. I'd served my time, done my duty, and couldn't imagine what came next. Coming back to high school felt like moving backward, like pretending to be someone I wasn't anymore." The crowd was silent, attentive. "But I learned something important this year. You don't get to be the same person forever. Growing up means becoming different versions of yourself, and that's true whether you serve in the military or work at a coffee shop or go straight to college." He caught sight of Emma in the crowd, smiling encouragement. "The person I was at 18 when I enlisted isn't the person I am now at 21. The person I am today probably won't be the person I am at 30. And that's okay. That's human." Marcus looked around at his classmates, most of whom he'd grown up with, all of whom were about to scatter to different colleges and careers and life paths. "We're all transitioning today, from high school to whatever comes next. Some of you will discover that your plans change. Some will find that life takes you places you never expected, and some will learn that the person you become is different from the person you thought you'd be." He paused, thinking about the consultation work he'd started with the GDC, the other young veterans he was helping, the sense of purpose he was slowly rebuilding. That's not a failure. That's growth. That's life. And that's what makes us human. The applause was warm and sustained. As Marcus left the podium, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time: excitement about the future. Not because he had it all figured out, but because he was learning that not having it figured out was okay too. After the ceremony, as families took pictures and graduates hugged goodbye, Marcus found himself surrounded by classmates who wanted to thank him for his speech, to wish him well, to say they'd learned something from his perspective. Even Tyler Morrison approached him, this time with his father in uniform beside him. "Thank you," Staff Sergeant Morrison said simply. "For the introduction to Carlos, for the perspective, for showing my son that different doesn't mean damaged." Tyler nodded. "I know I was an ass to you earlier this year, but listening to you talk about change and growth, it helped me understand some things about my dad, about myself too." As the crowd began to disperse, Emma appeared at Marcus's side. "So," she said, "what now? College? Military consultation? World domination?" Marcus laughed. "I thought I'd start with figuring out how to be a normal 21-year-old, then work my way up to world domination." Solid plan. They walked out of the gymnasium together, past the trophy cases and motivational posters, past the cafeteria where Marcus had once felt so alien and isolated. The same halls, but everything felt different now, manageable, human. Outside, the June evening was warm and full of possibility. Families were loading up cars with graduation flowers and taking final pictures. Soon, this chapter would end and new ones would begin. Marcus thought about the veteran consultation program he'd be working on full-time starting in the fall, about the college classes he'd enrolled in part-time, about the slowly healing relationship with his parents and the friendships he'd built with people who saw him as a whole person rather than just his military service. It wasn't the life he'd planned at 18. It wasn't the future he'd imagined during the darkest days of the war, but it was his life, complicated and imperfect and real. And for the first time since coming home, that felt like enough. As he drove home through the familiar streets of suburban Cleveland, Marcus reflected on how much had changed since that first day back at school. He'd learned that coming home from war wasn't a destination, but a process. That healing didn't mean forgetting or returning to who you used to be, but rather integrating all the pieces of yourself into someone new. The soldier who had left for war and the young man who had returned were both part of who he was now. Neither complete on their own, but together forming something stronger and more resilient than either could have been alone. The high school hell he'd expected had turned out to be something else entirely, a bridge between worlds, a place to remember what he was fighting for, and a chance to discover that he could be both a warrior and a human being. Marcus Chen was finally home,